If the paddle court was a battlefield, Agustín Tapia never broke a sweat. While others lunged and scrambled for survival, he glided, cold, calculated, and untouchable. Coaches whispered that his brain worked 3 moves ahead. Rivals studied him like a puzzle they couldn't solve. And fans, they didn't watch him play, they watched him perform. But behind that serene surface, behind the smooth shots and silent dominance, was a storm of obsession, betrayal, and ambition that nearly cost him everything. Because what most people don't know is that Agustín Tapia's rise wasn't destiny. It was war. Catamarca, Argentina, a place known for mountains, silence, and stories that never make headlines. It wasn't the kind of town where legends were born, but that's exactly what made Agustín Tapia's story feel unreal. While most kids were riding bikes through dust and dreaming of football, Tapia was already lost in something else, something he couldn't explain. At just 9 years old, he stepped onto a paddle court for the first time, and something clicked. Not like a spark, more like a lock snapping open. Coaches watched in disbelief. It wasn't just that he was good, it was how he moved, like the ball belonged to him. Like gravity bent a little differently around his body. He didn't swing for power, he used angles, timing, deception, and before long he wasn't playing with older kids. He was humbling them. People whispered he was a genius, that he didn't just play the game, he understood it in ways professionals twice his age still couldn't. By the time he turned 11, Tapia was already a local myth. But instead of chasing the spotlight, he kept his head down. No celebration, no outbursts, just quiet domination. His opponents left the court frustrated, not because they lost, but because they couldn't figure out how. And while most kids his age were building dreams, Tapia was building a weapon. Day after day, match after match, he treated the court like a lab, studying, calculating, perfecting. He watched matches on repeat, broke down movement frames, memorized strategies. He became obsessed with anticipation, the art of being where the ball was going to be before it got there. His family began to realize something strange. Tapia wasn't chasing paddle. Paddle was chasing him. At 13, he left his home to chase bigger competition. Moved between cities, lived out of bags, trained like his future depended on every single point. And the craziest part, he wasn't doing it for fame. He wasn't even chasing titles, he was chasing control. Because even at that age, Tapia knew. Talent gets you noticed, but control makes you untouchable. And it didn't take long before the legends started noticing. Names like Nito Brea, former champions, insiders, people who'd seen it all were suddenly leaning in. Watching this quiet, soft-spoken kid dismantle experienced players like he was following a script they hadn't read. They gave him a nickname, El Mozart del Paddle, not just for his age, but because his game had rhythm, flow, genius. The kind of brilliance that didn't shout, it whispered, but even as the hype grew louder, Tapia stayed silent, focused, watching, waiting. Because even then, at just 14 years old, he wasn't thinking like a rising star. He was thinking like a future king. And the kingdom he was about to take had no idea what was coming. By the time he turned 15, Agustín Tapia had already outgrown the courts of Argentina. The same dusty arenas where he once annihilated grown men now felt too small, like he was playing a game on half speed. So, with a bag of clothes, a few rackets, and a mind wired for domination, he did what no one expected. He walked away from comfort and straight into the fire. He moved to Spain, ground zero for the most competitive paddle circuit in the world. No friends, no family, no promises. Just a kid who wanted to prove that being the best wasn't enough. He wanted to be undeniable. At first, they didn't take him seriously. He was quiet, respectful, even a little shy. No swagger, no ego. Just long hours at practice and a stare that never blinked. He trained like he was chasing something no one else could see. But when he stepped on the court, the air changed. He didn't move like a newcomer. He moved like he owned the place. There were no nerves, no overthinking, just clean footwork, perfect timing, and a level of vision that made it seem like he was playing with a drone overhead. Seeing shots 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. It didn't take long before the top Spanish players started noticing. And not everyone was thrilled, because Tapia wasn't just winning, he was making it look easy. Pros with years of experience were walking off court red-faced, confused, humiliated. They weren't just losing points, they were being disassembled. The backlash was immediate. Whispers started spreading in locker rooms and back channels. He's too green. Overrated. Some even suggested he was being protected by sponsors who wanted a new poster boy for the sport. The resentment wasn't always loud, but it was there. Cold shoulders, practice invites that never came, backhanded compliments dressed as advice. And Tapia? He said nothing. He didn't complain, didn't clap back on social media. He didn't even acknowledge the noise. Instead, he buried himself deeper in training. 12-hour days, frame-by-frame video analysis, diets, recovery, mental reps. He turned pressure into fuel and silence into strategy. It was clear, Tapia wasn't just playing to win, he was planning a takeover. And it showed in the way he approached the game. While most players trained for rallies, Tapia studied for patterns. He wasn't reacting, he was predicting. Opponents found themselves out of position before they'd even swung the ball. His lobs were timed like clockwork, his volleys surgical, and that stare, always calm, always focused, like he was waiting for the sport to catch up to him. They started calling him El Silencioso, the silent one, not because he was quiet off the court, but because his game didn't need words. It spoke volumes without making a sound. By 16, Tapia was no longer a promising talent. He was a threat. Tournaments rearranged schedules to get him on center court. Sponsors lined up. Crowds grew. But success didn't buy him immunity. Veteran players doubled down. They started targeting him during matches, testing his mental toughness, questioning his sportsmanship, trying to get under his skin. And still, Tapia gave them nothing. No emotion, no reaction, just more dominance. And behind all of that, a teenager, living alone, training like a machine, carrying the weight of a country's hope and the envy of an entire league. He wasn't even old enough to buy a drink, but he was already disrupting a sport that didn't know what to do with him. Because when someone this young, this disciplined, and this lethal steps onto the court, there are only two choices: adapt or get out of the way. By 2019, the whispers were getting louder, not just about Agustín Tapia's talent, but about his inevitability. He'd spent years circling the main stage like a storm no one could predict. Now, it was time. The World Padel Tour gave him his shot, but it didn't come the way anyone expected. They paired him with a man who'd already written himself into the sport's history, Juan Martín Díaz, the living legend, the magician, the former world #1. At first glance, the pairing didn't make sense. One was a teenager still learning how to navigate the spotlight. The other, a decorated veteran whose prime had come and gone. People called it a publicity stunt, a mismatch, a final tour for Díaz and a free lesson for Tapia. But when they stepped on the court, everything changed, because Tapia didn't play the role of the rookie. He refused to. From the very first match, it became clear. This wasn't a student learning from a master. This was a changing of the guard. Tapia wasn't adapting to Diaz, he was elevating him. He brought pace, vision, and angles no one saw coming. His footwork was so clean it made opponents hesitate. His lobs landed millimeters from the back glass. His smashes, calculated to the edge of gravity. Diaz had the experience, but Tapia was the spark, and together they started setting tournaments on fire. Crowds couldn't look away. Commentators ran out of superlatives. Opponents started watching replays in disbelief, trying to decode the chaos Tapia created. By the end of the season, it was obvious. This wasn't a future star waiting for his turn. This was a storm in motion. The paddle world didn't just take notice, they hit the panic button. Because Tapia wasn't playing like a 20-year-old. He was controlling the rhythm, bending the pace, and reading the game like he'd lived it 1,000 times before. And the craziest part, he was still getting better. But success, especially at that speed, comes with a price. And for Tapia, that price came faster than anyone expected. Because just as quickly as the magic began, the headlines changed. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Agustín Tapia and Juan Martín Díaz were flying through the tour. One the rising storm, the other the eternal magician. But behind closed doors, the chemistry was cracking. Tapia wanted more control, more consistency, more fire, and Diaz, still a master, wasn't moving the same way he used to. Age catches everyone, but Tapia wasn't the type to slow down and wait for anyone to catch up. Then came the whispers. The glances exchanged on court, the frustrated body language, the strategic disagreements. The media didn't say it outright, but they didn't have to. The split came fast and no one saw it coming. No press conference, no goodbye tour, just a quiet announcement: Diaz and Tapia were done. Some fans were heartbroken, others furious. A few even called Tapia disloyal, arrogant, too young to be making power moves. But those close to him knew the truth. Tapia wasn't chasing comfort, he was chasing legacy, and his next move proved it. Because instead of pairing with someone safe, he chose Fernando Belasteguín, the most decorated player in paddle history, the GOAT, the iron-willed general who held the world #1 spot for 16 straight years. It was bold, risky, maybe even insane. One was the ultimate veteran, rigid, tactical, intense. The other was still evolving, creative, unpredictable, surgical. Critics hated it. Too different, they said. Too much ego. It'll never work. But Tapia knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't want a partner, he wanted a mirror. Someone to test him, push him, sharpen him, and from the moment they walked onto the court together, something shifted. Tapia, the quiet prodigy, was now standing shoulder to shoulder with the greatest to ever do it. This time, he wasn't the sidekick. He was the threat. The duo was explosive, defense from another dimension, counterattacks that broke the rhythm of even the best teams, and a cold-blooded synergy that turned every rally into a lesson in precision. Tapia wasn't learning anymore. He was leading. But what the world didn't realize yet was that this wasn't just a golden partnership, it was Tapia's test. Because greatness doesn't come from dominance, it comes from sacrifice, and behind the victories, behind the trophies, Tapia was beginning to understand that every move forward would cost him something. For most players, teaming up with Fernando Belasteguín would be the peak, a dream come true, an automatic place in history. But for Agustín Tapia, it was something else entirely. It was a crucible. Bela didn't smile much. He didn't celebrate points wildly or indulge in hype. He demanded excellence, every training session, every rally, every second, and for the first time in his young career, Tapia wasn't the most intense man in the room. He was forced to level up, fast. Gone were the days of improvisation and instinct. Under Bela's influence, Tapia's natural genius was reshaped into something terrifyingly precise. His footwork tightened, his shot selection became flawless. His vision, once instinctual, turned tactical, calculated. Together, they formed a duo that felt more like a machine than a partnership. Defense, impeccable. Transitions, ruthless. Counterattacks, instant. The chemistry was icy but undeniable. They didn't need to talk, didn't need theatrics. Every point was business. And business was booming. Tournament after tournament, they plowed through the rankings, dismantling even the most established pairs. For fans, it was thrilling. For opponents, it was hopeless. And for Tapia, it was addictive. Because for the first time, he wasn't just winning, he was controlling the game at every level. He was no longer a prodigy, no longer a question mark. He had arrived, but dominance has a dark side. The more he won, the more the pressure grew. Expectations piled on. Critics stopped asking if he would win and started demanding how much. Behind the calm stare, the cracks began to form. Rumors started swirling. Whispers about obsessive training routines, burnout, moments of silence during press events. A growing hunger not just for victory, but for something more. Because deep down, Tapia knew something no one else wanted to admit. This wasn't his final form. As great as the partnership was, flawless, disciplined, decorated, it wasn't his. He was still in the shadow of a giant, and Tapia wasn't built for shadows, he was built for storms. And when the time came to walk away from Belasteguín, to leave behind comfort, chemistry, and guaranteed wins, it wasn't out of ego, it was necessity. Because Tapia didn't just want to be remembered as the kid who conquered Padel. He wanted to be remembered as the one who rewrote it. After 2 years of near-perfect chemistry with Fernando Belasteguín, Agustín Tapia walked away, not because something was broken, but because he was no longer willing to be contained. And in 2023, he made a move that shocked the padel world. He didn't just change partners, he declared war. He joined forces with Arturo Coelho, a 6'3" wrecking ball of raw power and youth. If he was precision, Coelho was force. Where Tapia floated, Coelho exploded. Their games were almost opposites, but in the right hands, opposites can become weapons. Still, not everyone believed it would work. Tapia was methodical, surgical, a quiet killer. Coelho was chaos, wild, emotional, unpredictable. Critics said it was a risky bet. 2 young players, both hungry to lead, no veteran anchor, no guiding hand. Some even whispered that Tapia was walking into ego wars and instability, but what those people didn't understand was that Tapia wanted the chaos now. He didn't want to be guided, he wanted to burn the blueprint and draw his own map. And from the moment they stepped on the court, the results were terrifying. Their 2023 season didn't just start strong, it exploded. Abu Dhabi master Agustín and Arturo debuted with a title, tearing through the draw with a mix of power and finesse that left crowds stunned. The final, a complete showcase. Agustín's calm intelligence met Coelho's fury in perfect sync. La Rioja Open. Back in Tapia's home country, they silenced the pressure. Tapia's lobs floated like poetry. Coelho's smashes echoed like war drums. The crowd didn't watch, they worshipped. Chile Open, Paraguay Open, Granada Open. One after another, the trophies piled up. Agustín and Coelho didn't just win, they made the top seeds look like warm-up matches. They started the season with 9 straight finals and an absurd win percentage. Within months, the duo became the most dominant force on the tour. Tapia's transformation was complete. He wasn't the kid from Catamarca anymore. He wasn't the student of legends. He was the apex predator, reading, adapting, dismantling, and now armed with a wrecking ball of a partner who fed off destruction. But underneath all the domination, something darker was creeping in. The expectations were now impossible. Every match felt like it had to be a clinic, a slip-up, unforgivable. And when the winning streak finally snapped, critics circled like vultures. They said Tapia was cracking under pressure, that the team was built on adrenaline, not foundation. that the chaos he once craved was beginning to eat him alive. Injuries started showing up, long silent gaps in training, moments where Tapia looked distant even when winning. But here's the truth no one dared say out loud. Tapia wasn't crumbling, he was calculating. Because while others feared the crash after the high, Tapia was already preparing for the next climb. To the outside world, Agustín was untouchable. He was young, he was winning, he had a perfect partner. His name was etched across podiums, headlines, and highlight reels. Fans called him the face of a new era. Commentators used words like genius and inevitable. On paper, everything was flawless. But perfection, it always leaves a scar. Behind the trophies and titles, Tapia was dealing with something no one could see. The weight of always being right. Every move scrutinized, every decision judged. One bad tournament, he's losing focus. One injury, he's too fragile. Even his silence became a target. The same quiet intensity that once made him fascinating was now being called cold. And for the first time in his career, Tapia wasn't just fighting opponents, he was fighting expectation. The schedule was brutal, tournaments every few weeks, constant travel, non-stop pressure, training, recovery, strategy, on a loop. His body began to show signs of wear, taped ankles, strained muscles. Silent nods to his physios before matches. But on court, no complaints, no excuses, just precision. But the people around him started noticing something else. He wasn't smiling anymore. The love for the game was still there, but the joy, the playfulness, it was buried under layers of responsibility. He wasn't playing like a rising star anymore. He was playing like a man defending an empire. And when the pair hit a slump, when the magic didn't click as easily as before, the critics came out in full force. They said Tapia was too rigid, that his style was predictable, that maybe, just maybe, he had peaked. But what they didn't see were the hours Tapia was putting in behind closed doors, the solo sessions, the rehab routines, the brutal silent mornings where he trained without cameras, without coaches, just him, chasing the version of himself that no one else had even imagined yet. Because Tapia wasn't interested in defending a throne, he was preparing to evolve again. And maybe that's what separates him. Most players burn out when the spotlight gets too hot. Tapia, he studies the flame, he gets closer to it until it bends in his direction. Agustín Tapia is only 25 years old, let that sink in. Everything, the prodigy years in Argentina, the brutal climb through Spain, the chemistry with legends, the era-defining dominance with Coelho, it's all happened before most players even peak. But what makes Tapia terrifying isn't what he's done, it's how much he hasn't done yet. Because even now, with a shelf full of trophies and a name etched into Padel's elite, he doesn't act like a champion, he still trains like a challenger. Still re-watches matches like he lost. Still looks at the top ranking like it owes him something. The hunger hasn't faded, it's mutated. He's no longer the Mozart of Padel, he's the architect of his own empire. Ask the players on tour and they'll tell you there's something unsettling about facing Tapia now. It's not just the technique or the timing, it's the silence, the way he looks at you, like he's already figured out how the match ends. And yet, he's never satisfied. When he wins, he resets. When he loses, he studies. When he struggles, he disappears into the lab and comes back sharper than ever. It's not ego, it's obsession. Because Tapia doesn't want to be remembered as the greatest of his generation. He wants to be remembered as the man who changed how the game is played. And maybe that's why his story feels different. He doesn't have the flash of social media superstars. He's not constantly chasing the spotlight. But when he steps onto the court, the world stops. Because there's something about him that feels inevitable. Like no matter who you pair him with, no matter how strong the draw, no matter how loud the stadium gets, he's going to find a way to bend the match to his rhythm. And if that sounds like myth-making, ask yourself this. When was the last time you watched someone so young carry a sport like a man twice his age? Agustín Tapia isn't finished, he's just moved into his next act. And when it's over, when the numbers are counted and the records rewritten, it won't be a question of how good he was. It'll be a question of how we ever thought anyone else was close. They called him El Mozart del Padel, but Mozart played for kings. Agustín Tapia, he became one. And the craziest part? He's just getting started.